Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy, and welcome back to a brand new movie review, or actually a trilogy of movie reviews. I'm Chris Garner, joined with Al for the first time, I want to say, on an actual movie review. Usually you join us for the Battle of the Brackets episodes, but as soon as we knew that we were going to do these reviews, I knew that you were like the only guy I had to get on to do the reviews for this. We are doing our reviews on the Mummy Trilogy. This is the Brendan Fraser trilogy from 1999 to 2008, with the Mummy, Mummy Returns, and Tomb of the Dragon Emperor. And I want to say as well, like, even before, probably since before I even created the channel, we've been talking about these films for a long time, like off air, like on Facebook and everything.
Mm.
Okay.
Sorry,
okay.
I was going to have to try this. Sorry.
That was a segue right there for you to like jump on, but that's fine. That's fine. Okay. We can power on. So yeah, we've been talking a lot about these films, and the first film itself just sparked like this huge franchise, not just with the films itself, but there was an animated series that came out apparently, which I really want to check out now. I don't think I remember seeing the title card, but I don't remember actually seeing any of the episodes of that. There was a lot of video games. It spawned, well, actually, The Mummy Returns spawned the prequel with the Scorpion King, which then itself got loads of direct-to-video sequels.
Yeah.
There was a ride at Universal. This thing was huge. It's an absolute sleeper hit. They didn't expect it to be as big as it was. Made an absolute killing at the box office, and quite rightly so, because if we're going to go into it, first time watching these movies, I don't actually remember the first time I watched it, but I do remember watching them as a kid, absolutely loving them. Definitely the first two. We'll get to my thoughts on Tomb of the Dragon Emperor much later in the review. But even like it's very difficult for me even now to pick a favorite between the first Mummy film and The Mummy Returns. They are very closely knit. That's because it had the same cast, same director, and the same scriptwriter and everything like that. And I will go so far as to say I think The Mummy and Mummy Returns are the ultimate #1 quintessential summer blockbuster movie.
Well, I first saw the Mummy on, I saw a video of it in a charity shop, and I took it home and I wore that tape out, watching it over and over again.
Yeah.
And it's the extended edition, so you get like extra bits of Imhotep's effects.
There's an extended edition for these movies? Why have I not seen these? Now I wish I'd have watched those.
Like, I think it was the edition they normally sell. You don't see Omid Jalili's character like grab Rachel Weisz's leg, but in the extended that happens. It's like little things like that, only split seconds, but it actually adds up. And it makes it more enjoyable. So it's really weird when I watch it now. It's not got those bits in it.
Yeah, and I guess once you get used to I was talking about this actually with the movie news episode I did a couple of days ago, where we were talking about that Sony might be gearing up to censor their own movies and make clean versions. And we were talking about when you watch a film on the TV so many times, when they do like a TV edit and cut bits out, whether it's bits of swearing or bits of violence, whatever it happens to be, and you'll record it off the TV. I mean, talking about these films, this is going back in way in the day with like VHS cassette tapes, where I'd record stuff off the TV with the ad breaks in. You'd remember where all the ad breaks are, and you'd watch it so many times that the ad breaks almost felt like part of the movie itself. And then when you see the movie, whether it be an extended edition or even the film on its own, there's usually a lot of little changes and stuff, and it's kind of like, whoa, this is different to what I'm used to. Because with me, I only had The Mummy Returns on VHS cassette tape. I never had the first Mummy. I think I recorded The Mummy off the TV, I think, or maybe I just watched it on TV. For all the UK viewers out there, you know that The Mummy and certainly The Mummy Returns are on TV like every weekend. ITV2, Sunday afternoon. It's always usually The Mummy Returns.
Yeah.
And I always catch a bit every time it's on. It's always usually like the same bit that I catch. It's usually the bus chase, or it's some point towards the end when they're going towards the temple. But they're just so much fun. So do you have anything else to say about the first time watching it, how you got into this franchise? Or if not, we'll just jump straight into the...
Well, as a kid, I loved Hammer Horror, and that includes Bela Lugosi's Dracula and The Mummy with Boris Karloff. So jumping into the other Mummy film, I don't know. Can't remember if I thought they were related, but I definitely lumped them all into the same category, and he just gave me a love for that Hammer Horror, when it's slightly goofy on purpose or not.
Yeah, and I mean, these films are absolutely tongue-in-cheek as well. They have elements of horror, but it's kind of toned down a lot, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And, you know, I'm completely fine with that. They took it in a different direction from the original 30s and 50s Mummy films. I love those movies too, the Universal monster films. I love that whole roster of characters. And I do think that it did benefit with a modern retelling, because there's only so many times you can tell the Mummy story without changing it up somewhat.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
actually, before we even got to this film with Stephen Sommers directing, this went through a whole extended process of getting this film off the ground. So it started in around 92, I think it was. They asked Clive Barker to pen a script, who was the guy behind the Hellraiser films, or at least I think it was the first 3 Hellraiser films at least. And that script was apparently incredibly violent, incredibly dark, and a true horror film. Now, I really wish that I could have seen that movie. I do love the Hellraiser films, but at the time, I think Universal were looking to make a really low budget Mummy film. Like, they gave them the set bar of like 10 million for its budget. And I think Clive Barker's was tending to stray over that. So they said, look, we don't want your version. It then passed to Joe Dante, who came up with an idea, and he wanted Daniel Day-Lewis to play the Mummy, and it was going to be like a very brooding film. Like, he was going to play a brooding character of the Mummy. It was going to feature on the aspect of love and identity and everything like that. Again, I think they were straying to like a 15 mil budget. Universal having none of it, because, you know, Universal Studios are poor as a company. And then they even asked like George A. Romero, who's the guy behind the, you know, Night of the Living Dead films and that whole saga of films. And I think very similar to Joe Dante's script, that was going to be a very violent film. It was going to focus on like a love story and reincarnation again. Elements you can see that were eventually used in the 99 version. And I think actually this was the script that implemented the scarab beetles, the flesh-eating scarab beetles.
Oh, cool.
So again, you can see elements like permeating into it, and they were going to do the whole reincarnation thing, which I guess was eventually used for Mummy Returns with Evie's character and Angst on the Moon. Wes Craven was touted to do it. Eventually, it passes to Stephen Sommers, who it is Stephen Sommers, right? It feels like.
I think so. I think it is.
Isn't that like the name of Cyclops' character from X-Men? Like, I read that and I was like,
yes,
yeah,
it is.
Okay, I'm not off base on that one. But yeah, eventually it passes to him. He pitches his idea. And I quote, as a kind of Indiana Jones or Jason and the Argonauts with the Mummy as the creature giving the hero a hard time. That was the exact pitch he took to Universal. It worked, and thus we have the 1999 Mummy film. Now, with all that being said, let's get into it now. For one, Stephen Sommers, I love this guy. I'm trying to think of the movies I've seen outside of his 2 Mummy films and Van Helsing. He's got to have done some other stuff. I'm just checking it out now. Oh, that's bad. Okay, he did G.I. Joe, The Rise of Cobra, which was not a good movie in any way, shape, or form. But like, let's just go with those then. The Mummy and Van Helsing. They, again, with Van Helsing, it's a classic summer blockbuster film. It balances the idea of humor. He knows how to write a good ensemble film as well. Like, even if it's just a background character, side character, he gives each character so much personality and quirk that it just all gels together for such an enjoyable film experience.
He makes it feel like there's each film feels like its own world, and you feel like every character sort of has their part. You don't feel like anyone's, like, there are segments where, you know, humor pops in and then pops out again, but it never feels like it detracts from it. It just feels like that's part of their world.
Yeah, and
I think that to do that in one film, not just, you know, it's not like Lord of the Rings where they have multiple films to do that. It's a different style of writing, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, even the background character. We'll talk about the characters now. We'll get to some of the background characters later, but Brendan Fraser as Rick O'Connell. I'm going to go so far as to say it. Probably not now, because, well, back then definitely, and he's kind of just dropped off the face of the earth now. I need to put like you know, those wanted posters or missing posters out on those milk bottles they used to have in the US. Like, where is Brendan Fraser? I think he's doing a lot of indie films recently, a lot of low budget films. But back then he was a huge star, like absolute A-lister almost. He is so good in this movie, and I will say he's probably, if you look at, you know, Harrison Ford, for example, Indiana Jones, I'd say he's up there in terms of likability as a lead guy. Like, he could do comedy, he could do action. He's done serious films as well, such as Crash. I think that won Best Picture at the time, although a lot of people weren't happy that it did win, because apparently it wasn't that good. I haven't seen the film myself, but he really is just such an accomplished actor, and you can tell that he is having a blast on this film. Maybe not in Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, but definitely in these first 2. And I think that the chemistry between him and Rachel Weisz's character of Evie, it's absolutely there on screen. Like, you buy these 2 characters together, you buy his interaction with like Jonathan and everyone else around him. I don't think you could have got a better actor to play the protagonist of this movie than Brendan Fraser.
No, I agree. He's got a lot of confidence about him, but at the same time, he's not overbearing or doesn't insist upon himself.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I think you can tell the actors were having fun making this film. I mean, some of the moments of overacting, it's just they're having so much fun with the role. I think that really shines through. I think that's probably what makes the movie. Because
Yeah, and
if they'd have taken it seriously and acted really scared, it wouldn't have worked.
I mean, I don't get me wrong. I would have loved a kind of horror version of the Mummy
Yeah.
again to adapt that original 1930s Universal Monsters movie, but with the tone they're going for, and that they stick to that tone all the way through the movie. It doesn't deviate at all. It is that very campy, tongue-in-cheek, fun adventure
Yeah.
movie, summer blockbuster, and I love that about it too. So then we move to Evie's character of Rachel Weisz. Now, watching these movies again, and I did watch all three of these in preparation for the review today because I'd seen them all many numbers of times again, apart from Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, but because just they're on TV every week, so I've seen bits of them a lot of times, but beginning to end, it had been quite a while. I wanted to catch
Yeah.
myself up. Watching the first movie, she does play that damsel in distress character. They try and toughen her up a little bit. I think that comes into it more in the second one, though. In the first one, she is the very geeky, nerdy kind of damsel in distress character, and she plays it well. She plays it fine. I did find myself kind of finding Evie's character very irritating in the first movie, watching it again.
Yeah.
But I like Rachel Weisz, and she plays it fantastically. So she plays a slightly irritating character very well, as I'll say. She's not like really overbearingly bad or anything.
I know. Well,
in terms of the movie
use
itself.
Star Wars excuse.
Go on.
Anything anyone could ever say bad about A New Hope, you go, it was just supposed to be a goofy space movie. This is just meant to be a goofy mummy movie. It's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, characters not really, characters doesn't develop. She's just a damsel, but it doesn't matter. It's just a romp, isn't it? It's just a laugh.
Yeah, exactly. And I do think it captures that Indiana Jones quality to it. Now, don't get me wrong. Yeah. Indiana Jones, the trilogy, the fourth one didn't happen, is held up there in my top 10 films of all time. Nothing will ever come close to that trilogy in terms of like that action adventure style, I don't think. But there are the qualities there. And certainly in the set design, which we'll talk about later, there's these huge like tombs that they've built, and it feels very, exploratory, and you've got the danger and you've got the horror element to it. You've got the romance in there. You've got the action, and it all culminates into a really enjoyable experience. We've got a comic relief character in this as well. That's another staple of these kind of films, with John Hannah's character of Jonathan. I can understand some people might find his character annoying. I think he's
like
great.
Jar Jar. He's a bit like Jar Jar. Come on.
He is a little bit. He's very sort of.
But we like him. We still like him.
He's thrown into these situations where he tends to always get out of them, but never through his own cunning or development as a character. He kind of just he gets out of it by happenstance or by coincidence. Very much like the Jar Jar Binks character, you're right. But there's something about, I think it's just John Hannah and how he plays him. He's most known for, I'd say, Rebus in the UK. He's an accomplished TV actor as well as he's done some films too. But I love how he's always after money. He's always trying to get a better social status, and that's funny. Yeah, he gets somewhat of like a character arc in the first movie, though, with the whole. And I guess we'll just say this as well. We're jumping right into spoilers with these. This is just going to be a complete roundtable discussion.
It's a trilogy. You can't discuss a trilogy without giving away spoilers. I mean,
yeah. And let's be honest, this isn't a film where if you were told spoilers, you go like, like the entire film's ruined. Like, as you said, it's a romp. It's just a completely casual, I want to watch a fun movie for 2 hours. Just throw on The Mummy. Throw on The Mummy Returns. It's a great watch just for that. Let's see who we've got. Okay, we've got like another kind of sniveling comic relief character in the character of Benny, played by Kevin J. O'Connor, who I know more for playing Igor, and I think that's just down to his voice. This character just is so just like slimy and unlikable in the first one. You like him. He's a villain that you love to hate. And he's always trying to play for the winning side. He's on the side of Rick, and then when
he's on the side of himself because he's getting paid by the Americans.
Yeah. Again, it's all
as Imhotep turns up, it's like, oh, well, fair enough. Don't get killed.
Yeah. And what I love about this film too, and we'll get onto this when we talk about Imhotep, but with all the villain characters, even just like side characters that are just along for the ride, they meet some really fucking grim and horrible ends to this film. But definitely the Bennett character.
And
Yeah,
is very much a side character, but that's a pretty savage, shadow death.
yeah, and I love how they do that. I love how they do that as well. Just how this film's structured as well. Just talking about Answer the Moon really quickly. The entire sort of prologue at the beginning of the film, it's done very quickly. It's very quickly, sets up the story, you know exactly where it's going. And when we look at Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, which we'll talk about after we get past Mummy Returns, and I'm not giving anything away now, but I have seen the latest Mummy film with Tom Cruise. We'll be jumping on a review. That will be me, George, and Tate on that tomorrow night. They just really complicate the backstory, and it doesn't need to be complicated. What's the plot in this one? You've got Answer the Moon, who's the lover of the Emperor. She's not allowed to touch another man. Imhotep falls in love with her, touches her. This angers the Emperor. They kill him, and they're mummified and killed for treason. That's literally it. It's really simple. Yeah. It's done in about, like the first 5 minutes of the movie, if that. And boom, we're on the adventure. And then Tomb of the Dragon Emperor has like a whole over 10-minute convoluted story at the beginning. And even the new Mummy film too, it does exactly that. So always go back to this one.
You're forgetting the foreshadowing in the first one. With Rick, he's getting chased by the soldiers, and then he stops outside the statue of Anubis, and the sand moves, and it's Imhotep's face in the sand. That's great. Come on, that's a great concept. They should have reused that in the other films.
Yeah, and I mean the location shooting as well for this. I guess this brings us on to set design, although we do need to talk about Imhotep. But they shot on location for so much of this film. I don't think they shot in Egypt because of the political situation at the time. It just wasn't safe to do it, so they shot in Morocco and the Sahara Desert. They filmed some other places like in England too. But the cast and crew were feeling it, with heat stroke and things like that. And the creatures, I think there were like snakes and scorpions and spiders. Cast members were getting bit, crew members were getting bit. They had medical on hand all the time. People had to be airlifted out to go to hospital. They were in the absolute sticks with this film, but it shows. I know there's a lot of CGI in this film, but in terms of the actual location, you feel like you are in that desert with them, in this desert. Definitely. And there's that really tangible quality to it, which I appreciate in these kind of movies. I guess we should
next on the agenda.
We should talk about Imhotep. I'm going to pass this over to you. So we've got Arnold Vosloo.
Okay, can I talk about my theory?
Your theory? This is the first time I've heard about this. Oh no, it's not the first time I've heard about this theory. But go ahead.
I have a theory that Imhotep is gay.
Explain your theory and your reasons for thinking this.
Okay, he's always well groomed. He walks around in a loincloth and a waxed, oiled chest, bare torso. I reckon...
It's hot. It's hot in the desert, man.
I reckon it was the Pharaoh's daughter going off with an Nux and a Moon. And the Pharaoh was getting suspicious. So the daughter set up the gay friend to take the fall.
So you're saying that Imhotep was Nux and the Moon's gay BFF?
Yes.
Hey, I've seen more crazy things on the internet.
It's a better motive for killing Evie to bring her back.
And we talked about in Mummy Returns, when he dies, he gets carried down to hell by a bunch of naked dudes. So you might be right. You should do a whole dissertation essay on this theory and post it on the internet.
I'm thinking of doing that.
Believe me, I have seen more outlandish theories on the internet regarding many other films. So, but Arnold Vosloo, he plays it great, and he definitely does have that, going with your theory, very campy quality to his character. But I think you need that. This kind of role, the dialogue he gets given, the way he is very over dramatic. The scene, for example, where he conjures his face into the sand cloud, which is kind of the iconic poster image for this, and definitely the trailers. When he does that wide mouth thing and they CGI it, it's so dumb, it's so laughable. But
it's brilliant.
I think it's meant to be like that, and I give Stephen Sommers credit. I mean, I'd love to see some of the behind the scenes of this or an interview with him, but it seems like he knows how to make these films. And Universal gave him the helm for the first two Mummy films and the other Monsters Universe film with Van Helsing, where he threw loads of different iconic Universal monsters together in one film. It seems like he's got it cracked. He knows what tone to go with these films, and I think they work.
Would you was there any earlier attempt to get together some sort of cinematic universe with these films?
I mean, the Universal films went to about the 1950s, I think. I don't think they strayed into the 60s. But I think that
yeah,
Universal were trying for a long time to get something off the ground, and then they got to this. Although they never explicitly say that Van Helsing is tied into the Mummy films, you just kind of have it as almost like a spiritual successor because of the Stephen Sommers connection.
yeah,
They've more been trying to do it when we had the, what was it, the 2009 Wolfman film with Benicio del Toro. They
that
had
was awful. Yeah.
I haven't seen that movie, so I don't know what it's about. There was did they do a Frankenstein movie with
Oh, Frankenstein with that fella from Dark
Aaron
Knight.
Eckhart? Aaron Eckhart,
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah.
Two
I haven't
Face.
seen that, but
They
I
did
hear it's
that.
bad.
They did Dracula Untold with Luke
That's
Evans.
a great film.
And because that was, I'd say that's their fairly recent one, there was a lot of talks regarding this new Dark Universe as to whether they were going to bring him back as the Dracula character, if that was going to be in continuity with this. But I don't think they are. I think they're wiping the slate clean and they're starting afresh with this
Right.
new Mummy film. But yeah, I mean, this is a hugely lucrative property for Universal, and they've had it since the 30s. And every now and then you do get these new permutations come out, permeations, sorry, of all these films, and they're all geared towards what the current audience is like. So for this is a classic product of its time. It's that 90s going into the 2000s where CGI is kind of new and they're experimenting with loads of new things, and then the new one's just kind of an all-out action movie, I'd say, very much in similar vein to like X-Men Apocalypse, where you have the Apocalypse character raging destruction on the entire world. It's very similar to that. There's another character I wanted to briefly talk about, but I'll talk more about him in Mummy Returns. You've got Ardeth Bay, played by Oded Fair. Love this guy, and if I'm going to give him the description, and I've called him this ever since I saw it as a kid, he's the Egyptian Aragorn.
Yeah.
And, you know, he's awesome. He's just that ass kicker.
He's a sand ninja.
Sand Ninja Jedi. I think they're called the Magi, aren't they?
They are the Magi, yeah.
It's very similar. Love this character. He's so cool. He's one of my favorite characters in the film. Let's get on to
He's a bit of a bit part, to be fair. He's very memorable, but he's essentially a bit of a bit part.
And I think
he's
that's
not in a lot.
Again, like these films, even if a character's not on screen all that much, they are still really memorable. If we're looking at the first Mummy film, for example, you've got the guy who's kind of like the Sulla character from the first Indiana Jones film. He tags along with Rick at the beginning, just completely out of money. They promise him so much of a percentage. That's when the scene where he's getting hung, right? Hanged. There we go.
Hanged.
And even he meets like a fucking brutal end with those scarab beetles.
Yeah.
And I know it's complete. Yeah, I know it's complete bullshit with the scarab beetles because they weren't flesh-eating creatures like that. They were just pretty much dung beetles.
No, I mean the actor is Omid Jalili from Calcium Kid.
I have never seen Calcium Kid. That's like the one Orlando Bloom movie that came out.
That's a really good film.
Is it a good film? Yeah. I remember the poster vividly.
It's like a kid's version of Lock, Stock. It's a bit oi raggedy taggedy, but it's a good fun film.
Oh, check it out. Because I remember it. I mean, that was after Lord of the Rings, and I think it was either between. There was just before the last couple of Pirates of the Caribbean movies, I think.
Yeah, it was about 2004-ish, I think.
And it just kind of dropped there. And then after he did the last Pirates of the Caribbean movie, Orlando Bloom kind of disappeared until he did The Hobbit and then the new Pirates of the Caribbean movies. That was kind of funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd actually talked about that scene where Rick's getting hanged. Oh god, what's that? Brendan Fraser actually almost died doing that.
What?
Like they had to resuscitate him right after that. So
the cut they used.
I think so. Well, I don't know. I'm guessing they filmed multiple takes, and usually like health and safety on set is really good. They've always got someone on hand to control it, but I don't know. Something must have went wrong, but he lost consciousness and they had to resuscitate him, apparently. This is according to Wikipedia, but I have heard that before. So again, all the actors going through all these just hardships throughout it, but you feel that in the characters as they're kind of getting beaten down and weathered throughout the film. Let's talk about the set design then. So we were talking a little bit about this before. We both agreed that Mummy Returns probably has a lot more CGI. It came out 3 years afterwards. They could probably do a lot more stuff with the effects, and they also had the stuff they'd used in the first film that they could work on. But I think the first film strikes the best balance. I do still have a lot of problems with the CGI in the first Mummy film, but those sets they build, and I'm going to check now, it did say how long it took them to build the final temple. They built it in a dormant volcano, which is pretty awesome. Do you want to just chat a bit before I find this? Because I do want to get the right thing.
Yeah. the set design is great in these films. To be fair, the tunnels were really simple but kind of claustrophobic, especially with the sand on the floor. You feel like the sand sort of moved with the wind, as Imhotep walked by or someone spun around. It just sand would move, and I think that sort of giving an element of movement to the camera angles helped create an atmosphere.
Yeah,
because
right.
those sets were very, very, very simple, but very effective. The way you shafted lights from the roof,
and they don't feel like Jungle Run sets either. Like they feel like actual temples. I know they probably made it out of all polystyrene, but it does look so good, especially during that last action scene when they're all in there. So apparently it took 16 weeks to build. Included fiberglass columns rigged with special effects. Then they also built another set which was apparently 600 feet in length.
That would have been the treasure room, wouldn't it?
Yes, yeah, probably. Well, it says that it featured a steam train, Ajax traction engine, 3 cranes, an open 2-horse carriage, and oh Jesus, wow!
And a dog called Colin.
Yeah, well, this is just hilarious when you think that Universal wanted to give the Mummy film a 10 mil budget, and then when they heard Stephen Sommers' idea, they gave it 80 million. Sorry, I was going to say 800 million.
Really?
That would be ridiculous.
I was just thinking, how are they going to get all that done?
They gave him 80 million in the end. I guess we can talk about the action and CGI now, because tying in with the budget, they spent 15 mil of that budget on the special effects. And they used Industrial Light and Magic for the special effects, famous for doing Star Wars, many other films, mostly famous for doing Star Wars. This was, I'm guessing at the time, and I can't remember back to when I first watched these films as to what my idea of it was like and what it looked like then. I'm guessing at the time this was cutting edge stuff. I mean, we're talking 1999, or we're talking CGI kind of came prominent with a little bit before, but mostly Jurassic Park in 93 was where they were experimenting things with what they could do. Then we had Terminator 2 with the T-1000. Constantly develops. In 1999, which is the year we get Phantom Menace, which really pushed the threshold for CGI. We also get this movie as well. And you can tell that, especially with the Mummy and probably the other henchman mummies in it as well, they were experimenting with motion capture, which was a very new technology. I thought that Jar Jar Binks was the first character they ever used it on in a film, but I don't know if this was around the same time, because I think they both had roughly around the same release date, I think. The CGI doesn't look good by today's standards.
Some of it does. No, some of it does. That scene with Imhotep, and he's just killed one of the Americans, and Rick's shooting him, and he's just sort of, giving it all the Liam Gallagher.
And it's going through.
I mean, it's a little bit. Yeah, obviously it's not real, but I don't think it looks that bad. The sand face looks a bit rubbish. But
I think the water.
Generally, I think the CGI holds up.
It's fine for what it is, and it ties in with that. I don't even care. Switch your brain off. This is just a fun adventure. I can kind of handle some crappy CGI. But there's never a moment in this film where I felt afraid of Imhotep. I never felt afraid of any of the mummies in the film, because they did look so fake. And some of the close-up shots for the stunts, they do use people in costume, especially towards the henchman mummies at the end where Rick's fighting them. You've got the one cut in half that's crawling across the floor to try and get to him. That stuff looks great, and I do wish they'd have utilized makeup a lot more in it and used a lot more people in costume. But I get why they use CGI, especially for the redesign of the mummy they wanted to do, because if you look at the original mummy, it was literally a guy in
bandages.
So you can get away with, obviously, and they didn't have the technology at the time to do CGI or anything like that. But with a new one, they wanted to go for that decomposed look where you see Imhotep go through different stages of reconstruction, where when he's first born...
That's an interesting point, because at the end of the Boris Karloff mummy film, do you remember the very end when he's in the coffin and he's dying, and you can see him? They've overlaid it so it goes from human to skeleton.
Yes.
So you see in that film, you see him degenerate, and in this one you see him regenerate.
Yeah, that's cool. Maybe they did. Maybe they did that
cool
to flip it on its head. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
But again, I understand why they use CGI for it, because that would have been not impossible, but it would have been very difficult to pull that off effectively and realistically with makeup, with all that decomposed look, and you can see through his head and everything. And the scenes you talked about where they're shooting him and the bullets are going right through him. But I do think in a lot of scenes it looks kind of crummy, and I don't know if that's because
Give me an example. Go on.
You know, when
from the sand scene, apart from the sand scene,
apart from the sand scene,
with the plane, yeah, apart from that one.
Okay, the initial birth of Imhotep, where you see him, I don't think looks very good. When he's like holding the canopic jar up, like that looks very shaky. The other one is where he's kind of wearing that shawl and he's sitting in the chair, and he's just ripped that guy's eyes out. And this poor guy who's gone through all this, and then they get him back in the chair. He thinks he's got away, and they're like, "No, we need more of you. Like, we need to kill you right now." And then he kind of takes this shawl off, and you've got like maggots, is it, crawling all over him,
it's
or
like
something
a
like
beetle
that?
or something, and he chews it.
Yeah, that
Something
looks
like that.
kind of ropey. It's mostly whenever you see the mummy just in full mummy form. When it's kind of like a little bit of Imhotep in human form with like a few CGI touch-ups, that looks great. That looks fine.
Yeah.
I didn't actually have a problem with the sandstorm thing. I more have a problem with the water mummy face in the second one, which looks like a complete video game cutscene.
That was terrible. There's no defending that.
If we talk about that sandstorm scene, though, because it's on the poster and it's everywhere in the trailer, even like my memory, I remember that scene being a lot longer than it actually is in the film. I was very surprised to see how quickly it's over. There's only really 2, maybe 3 shots of that head in the clouds trying to get them. And then you've got that it's completely offset as well with Imhotep's just like really dramatic human form as he's doing like he's like got this exact same facial capture as the cloud itself.
Yeah.
And it's completely hammy. But yeah, I remember that scene being much longer than it actually was, that whole plane chase with the sand cloud, but it doesn't overstay its welcome or anything like that.
Yeah, I think it, to be fair, it's only the first time you've seen Imhotep use his powers. Because you've seen plays happen, but I think it just said in the prophecy it was going to happen anyway. Yeah. So you've seen him come back. You might have seen him strip a guy, but of liquid.
goes more with your theory.
Strip a man of his fluids in a hotel room. But you haven't seen him use magic or anything. So it's quite interesting to actually see him do that. Because in the second one, he starts off with his powers, and in the end, he loses his powers because Anubis takes them.
And it's that image of the sand cloud face. They use it again in the sequel, but there's a lot of parallels actually, because I watched these 2 films pretty much back to back. There's a lot of callbacks to the first one in Mummy Returns, which I love stuff like that. Without giving anything away, even in the new Mummy film, which you can see in the trailer, they do use that image of the face in the sand cloud, and that all stemmed from this movie. So it's nice that, I guess it's a lasting image now of the Mummy franchise. We need to talk about the music for this thing. So Jerry Goldsmith did the music. He's done the music to Mulan. I believe he did the music to Rambo as well. And there's a lot of very similar signifiers in that. He's very much brass focused, very bombastic score when it kicks in this film. I love the sound to this thing. I was paying more attention to it watching the film now, and it's just so good. And even when I was editing the video intro, which you'll see at the beginning of this video, I had to look for the perfect song to get. So I got the Mummy main theme from this. It's just quintessentially Egyptian sound. And
great, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely amazing. Right from the opening few notes of the soundtrack. And it's just, because there is so much action, it just never lets up. Like, it's constantly just like this huge brass sound. Even has like the love theme in there as well, which is nice. That offsets the action too. But I'm definitely going to be listening to this soundtrack on its own now, because I've only ever watched it alongside the movie, but listening to it more now, I definitely think I want to listen to this thing on its own.
I think this is definitely one of the top movie soundtracks. One of my favorites, definitely. It's very gregarious. It's quite light-hearted. Like, even in the darker scenes, it never goes, like Harry Potter 7, like, ooh. It's just, it's sort of a 6 out of 10, not an 8 out of 10. I think it's great. I think a lot of times you don't notice the score when you first watch it, when it's just underneath. I can't remember. I think there's some sort of violin trill, isn't there, when it sort of zooms in on Imhotep and he comes to life.
Yeah,
things like that. I love those in films.
And I mean,
make it.
The score itself is very different from like those 1930s horror films.
Oh, definitely. They were dirges, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, music develops through the ages, of course, but I think this one absolutely fits, and kind of tying in with that Indiana Jones theme. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not comparing this score to the likes of John Williams' Indiana Jones score, but
It reminds me of
For an
that.
adventure film, yeah, you need that rousing, energetic, punch with like the
Tally-ho,
brass when it
lads.
kicks in.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And this film has it, and Mummy Returns definitely has it as well. So before we give overall opinions on the first Mummy film, if there's any other scenes we haven't talked about, favorite scenes from this film,
Oh,
yes. Stand out?
The guy who gets set on fire, the Magi who gets set on fire, the guy with the hook. Where's the key? Key? What
Oh,
key?
yes.
I love that scene. It's so overdramatic.
And was it like doesn't Rick like barge in or something and like
he barges
accidentally
in, he knocks him, and he goes out the window or something.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's any other scenes in the first one that I haven't talked about that I love. Just the entire end action scene's really cool. I do like
bad
that.
CGI moment. I looked at him in Soul coming back. With
the
blob, the black blob. That was the moment where I went, I don't know if I can. But to be fair, the 5 soldiers in the same scene, they were good.
Oh, with the shields,
yeah, they were cool.
And you've got that absolute trailer shot where Rick screams at them, and then they scream back with the rounds, and he just runs. I love that. That's just classic Rick all the way through this movie.
And they come back in the second one. Brilliant.
Yeah. Even though I've watched these fairly recently, because the first 2 are so very closely tied together, I struggle to remember which bits are from which movie. Out of the 2, I actually think that I've probably watched Mummy Returns the most. And watching them back to back now, it's still very difficult for me to pick a favorite because I love them pretty much equally. I think I enjoy the action a lot more in the second one, and the set piece in the second one a lot more. But I think character-wise, the first movie is definitely stronger, and it's focused on the characters, whereas the second one, you could argue that the action set pieces are there at the forefront, and the characters are kind of just along for the ride to get you from point A to point B. But if I'm going to give overall opinions on the first Mummy film, I would, even by 2017 standards, I would absolutely still recommend this movie. It's a thoroughly entertaining watch. It's fun. It's got the thrills. It's got little bits of horror in there, but it is that classic tongue-in-cheek action movie. And action movies that are very hard to make now. I'm trying to think of other ones. Maybe you could say National Treasure with Nicolas Cage. Not quite to this level.
The second one's better, but yeah.
Yeah. But it's just fun, and I can see why ITV2 play it all the time, because they're looking for that just, Sunday afternoon. I don't want to watch any. Yeah, I don't want to watch anything particularly involved. Let's just get a fun summer popcorn shoveling movie on. This is absolutely a go-to. Do you have any other opinions on the first Mummy film?
I think it's amazing. It really left an impression on me as a kid, and it's only when I think back now I go, oh yeah, I still think about that movie all the time. I think it's really impressive that Imhotep really comes across as a character, and you sort of feel for him towards an Uxamanoon, etc. I can't say the bloody name. You get all of expressions. You get everything through his expressions and through his emphasis, even though he's not saying anything in English.
Yes, yeah.
And I find that really impressive as an actor. I know it's a light-hearted movie, but damn, you can't really half-arse it. You've really got to go all in. So
it is a very believable love story between those two. I mean, the one between Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz's character, absolutely, like their chemistry just sizzles off the screen. But even with, you have to have that believable chemistry between An Ox on a Moon and Imhotep, because that is the motive for him doing everything that he's seeking to do. And you could argue that the entire relationship is based. Yes, you could argue that too, but like their entire relationship is founded on just saying sweet nothings back and forth to each other.
I like sand. I hate sand. It's Egypt. Yeah.
It's coarse and rough and irritating. But yeah, no, it is absolutely believable, and it's good that even regardless of the reservations I have with the CGI and Imhotep in most of the scenes, you do still get that connection even in his motion capture form. That's mostly with the Mummy Returns stuff, though. Okay, I've said everything on the first Mummy film. Should we get to Mummy Returns?
Yeah, let's move on.
Okay, so 2002, Stephen Sommers Returns. Clearly the huge box office hit that the first Mummy film was, granted them the sequel, got them the go-ahead, and we have The Mummy Returns. And I kind of just said it at the end of my review for the first movie that I would argue that this one was the one that I watched the most as a kid. Maybe that's because it's the only one I had on video, like proper video. but I just found myself naturally gravitating to this one a whole lot more. And I don't quite know why, because they are very similar movies. Again, I think it's because of the action set pieces. I remember as a kid, and I know I'm jumping on ahead a little bit here, but the Army of Anubis was like the coolest thing I'd ever seen. I love the design of them. I love that epic battle at the end. Even watching it now, you kind of get those, again, I hate to compare it to the likes of this movie, but I got those Return of the King Black Gate moments where they know they're probably all going to die, but it's this last ditch effort to cause that distraction to, you know, get the enemy out. I love stuff like that. But yeah, I just watched this film loads as a kid, even more times on TV. And it's one that I, even when it's on TV now, if I'm downstairs for like 10 minutes or so, I'll be like, oh, what bit's Mummy Returns at? Oh, okay.
No,
so how about you, this movie?
I always watch films in order. I can never just watch Fellowship of the Ring. I have to watch all of the other films afterwards. So I've never really seen it out of context. But I think it's brilliant. I think it's a great successor. It really carries on the energy, but you can tell the characters have moved on, and the dynamics have changed. And they've got a son now, and they get a bit of the parentiness in there, and it's a bit, you know, interesting. I think it's a great continuation. It definitely has the same feel as the first one, the same level of excitement, but there is more of a feeling that there's everything to play for, even though it's just a bad guy going to destroy the world, must save the world. I guess, but it's a bit different because you're racing against the bad guy to stop a bad guy. So
and if I remember rightly, it definitely does. I mean, it's that classic goal you go into with movie making when you try and do a sequel. It's got to be bigger, it's got to be louder, it's got to be more action packed than the first one. And I'd say this one definitely is. And if I remember rightly as well, Imhotep, although he's the bad guy in this, he's also seeking to kill the Scorpion King, isn't he? Or is he trying to?
He is trying to destroy the Scorpion King and take control of his armies.
Yes, that's it. So I like how you've got those two antagonists characters in there. I mean,
not really, because the Scorpion King does nothing.
I like the setup for his character, though. I mean, we get another kind of prologue at the beginning of this film, and this was the first film, I think, that introduced The Rock. I think this is his first film he did. George on our channel has a review for that. He's currently doing a new series called The Rockathon, where he's setting out to review every single film The Rock has featured in, whether it be a voiceover, a cameo, or a fully fledged role. And episode 1 was The Scorpion King, so you can find a review to that. And I guess his character was so popular from this movie as well, or at least The Rock just as a persona, that it did grant us that spin-off movie with the Scorpion King, which we're not going to be reviewing. I've only seen it once. I remember Bernard Hill being in that movie, if I remember rightly. King Theoden.
Oh, God, I think it was as well, yeah.
So clearly he needed a paycheck, and that he got it for that movie. But no, I love the setup. Again, visual design, everything like that. No. But and I think it's because you have Stephen Sommers returning to direct and write this that you do get that nice continuation feel with it. You could almost watch the first one and the second one straight back to back, like a big long 2-part, like 4-hour movie.
There's always a lot of sun in these movies. When you think about The Mummy, there's always down in tombs, you know, bandages. There's always a lot of sun.
Yeah,
spend a lot of time outside in these films. If I can't remember what it was, there was another film where they find a temple or tomb or something, and it's all filmed inside the tomb, and Anubis turns up at the end. I can't remember which one it was, but this film is entirely in the day, basically. So it's quite impressive. Even when they're inside, it's very brightly lit. There's lots of gold sand and lots of gold jewels. So it's quite impressive to do a horror movie when everything's so brightly lit and it still work.
Yeah, and I do love the color scheme in this film. I mean, the posters for the first 2 movies, even the poster for the third one, it's got those like bronzes and goldy browns and orange. And it's really, I do love the posters for these movies. They are really just visually stunning posters. And the set design and everything carrying over from the first movie, you've got the same people working on it, I can only assume, and it looks equally as good as the first one. Definitely a lot more emphasis on CGI in this, though, and we'll get onto that with the action. I'm going to talk about the one element I don't like in this film, and it's not the worst kid actor I've ever seen, but it's the character of Alex, the son of Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz's character in the film. it's that cutesy kid thing, and he's not a great actor, and most of his lines are pretty cringeworthy. He actually gets a lot of callback lines to the first movie. The opening scene, for example, they do the whole, in the first film, it's the bookcases falling down like dominoes. In this film, it's the concrete pillars falling down. They do the whole book thing at the end when he doesn't know the last symbol, like Jonathan's character from the first one. It's a bird, it's a stork. And I do like throwbacks like that, but if I'm going to find one problem with this film, it's probably the kid. But as I said, it's by far not the worst kid actor I've ever seen in the film. And you could kind of argue that it does still fit in tone with the movie itself as well.
I think the bit characters are very good in The Mummy too. I think the bit characters are a lot better than one, because you've got Alan Armstrong as the curator of the British Museum. You've got that bloke who played Terry in The Bill, and the other as one of the bandits. And one of the other bandits, the lanky guy, was Conan Doyle in Shanghai Nights with Jackie Chan.
Oh, nice.
Owen Wilson. So I like they've got actually fairly decent actors in there to do those pretty comedic but tragic side stories.
And you've got some...
It adds to the universe, doesn't it? It makes it more expansive. It doesn't feel self-contained.
And what I like about that as well is, and this fit into the first one where you had that stiff upper lip British war pilot who wanted his one last chance at glory. I like when films do this where you don't need prequel stories and set up for all these things. Like Rick just bumps into someone he knows from his past, he knows a guy, and just from the chemistry and the banter back and forth, you establish a long history of these missions that they've been on together. And you get the same in this with the character of Izzy as well. Who's the guy they go to when they need to fly to Egypt. Right from the first one, he's like, Rick shot me in the arse or something.
Got me shot in the arse, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, why do you wear the eye patch? And he says, like, oh, I just do it to look cool. Like, he hasn't even got like a dead eye or anything like that. I love all stuff like that. And also one of the henchman characters as well, played by, I can never say his full name. I'm going to say his first name, Adewale. He played Mr. Echo from Lost. He's the black guy on Imhotep's side. And you get this great rivalry between him and, God, I'm useless with character names, Ardeth Bay.
Lochnar, yeah. Ardeth Bay, yeah.
That's it. And I mean, they set up this rivalry right from the beginning. And every time these two are engaged in combat, you get like little bits of it at the start, and they get their full fight. I think it's in the jungle, isn't it, where they face down and
they only fight a couple of times. I would have liked more of that in the film, to be honest. I would have liked to be developed a bit further.
And I mean, you're right. Every character, bit part or not, they all get their time to shine, and they are all really memorable, which is just testament to. I'm going to give Stephen Sommers the credit for that. He knows how to write a screenplay for characters like this in a movie with this kind of tone. So we talk about the action in this one. So obviously they have the tech that they used in the first one for Imhotep again. But there are a lot more questionable CGI moments in this film, and I think that's because they do ramp up the amount. I think they are trying to be very ambitious with what they do in this. I mean, you have entire armies in this one, and I mean, the army stuff looks fine. The close-up shots of the it's not Anubis. Is it Anubis?
Yeah,
it is. Yeah. When the close-up shot, they didn't have the textures back then for CGI, but they look fine. Yeah. The one bit that doesn't look good in this, actually, there's two bits. The major one that everyone remembers, though, is the Scorpion King at the very end.
That was awful.
Doesn't look good. Does not look good. Looks like a PlayStation 1 cutscene. And I think they could have got around it. It would be very ambitious to do if they did go with that kind of character design for the Scorpion King. You could have had The Rock hooked up to some kind of harness and CGI'd around it. I don't know how well that would have looked in the fast-paced action scenes, though. It probably would have been easy just to fully CGI it all. And I'm guessing it was Industrial Light and Magic that did the effects again for this one. And they're always trying to push the envelope of what they can do. And if you look recently, for example, with Rogue One, what they do with Peter Cushing's character, with Tarkin, even with Princess Leia at the end, I know a lot of people thought that one was probably the shakiest one out of the two. I thought they both looked great, but we've seen how far this technology has advanced now in terms of capturing the likeness of a human, of an actor. I think this was when it was really starting out. And for any point in effects, when you're starting out, by comparison, it's not going to look good. And oh boy, does the Scorpion King not look very good in this movie.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think especially because they mix it with the acting, the actors so much.
Mhm.
Like you've got Rick and you've got Imhotep, but then you cut to the random red guys in a hole for some reason, and you've got the Scorpion King that just looks like a piece of leather.
Yeah, it's just so plasticky and like a
Yeah,
wax shine on his face, and
like Morph.
yeah,
It doesn't.
like they just didn't have the textures for it back then. There's one
I
shot
gave him
that's
no lines as well.
yeah. I mean, they set him up to be this big bad, and maybe that was because, well, I mean,
He said more in the
Rock's
prologue
fine.
than he did when he actually appeared. Christ.
Yeah, I mean, The Rock's fine, but I don't know if they limited his lines because they weren't sure on his acting, or but even if he was going to be like a kind of grunt kind of character, you could have just had him throw some lines out there. I don't know if that would have looked even weirder though, with like the weird mouth movements they would have had for it.
They could have at least CGI'd the body, but done some headshots, like with Dooku. Because
Yes,
obviously it wasn't
yeah.
Christopher Lee in his 80s, but they made it sort of work. You go, yeah, fine, whatever.
Mm.
It kind of they pulled it off. They could have done that.
It's all about blending when it comes to CGI if you want it to look effective. And you're right, if even if they just like close up film him just The Rock from from the waist up, like you could have had
Yeah.
him on set to do that, and I think that would have looked better. The CGI would have still looked ropey, but at least it would have been blended with some real shots, and you could cut it between the editing. It would have looked fine. Another really shaky bit of CGI in the film, other than the water, which I've already talked about, is the end jungle sequence where the entire
Sucks into it.
ripped up. Yeah, there's a
Yeah,
scene where like they're
I
running
like that
upstairs.
scene. I like that. It's so overblown and so ridiculous.
Yeah,
I think it's just great fun.
I mean, it's absolutely the best way to end the movie. I mean, these kind of movies, you do want to kind of go all in with the action and that kind of end design.
We've had a city disappear. Now we're having a jungle disappear.
Yeah,
Taking it up a notch.
yeah, and I mean, the effects work for like programming every single tree and the whole animation of it. I mean, I know the effects guys in this film did an absolutely amazing job, probably for the tech they had at the time, but by today's standards, it doesn't look very good. And I can't recall. I'd love to go back and watch these movies for the first time again, see what I with like my mentality now and see what I think. But
yeah,
maybe it looked good at the time. That's the only thing I can say. There's a lot of other henchmen in it as well. You've got like the pygmy things in the film, which are CGI, which don't look great. It's kind of a weird action scene. It's fine though, and especially when we get to the third one, I guess the scene with the Yetis is the best equivalent of that scene from that film, or best equivalent.
Yeah, what I liked in that was you could see the pygmies had killed humans for thousands of years. So it's not like how they're the only people to have done this. It gives it a bit of a backstory, and again it makes it a slightly wider world. It adds a little bit of detail. It fills in a blank somewhere. I like films that do that slightly.
And it serves in and of itself as just like that middle, like that 3/4 mark action beat before we get to the big ultimate climax at the end. Going back to the characters, though, going back to the acting, I will say that Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz, their chemistry in this film just absolute sizzles off screen. They're great in the first one, but you can tell that they work really well together offset, and they bring that that chemistry they probably had and that back and forth, that banter offset into the film as well. I really like that. And even Brendan Fraser has some like really good dramatic moments in this film. I mean, the bit where Evie dies for a little bit, it's a very believable reaction he says when
definitely.
Scenes like that in films can be played very cheesy, where it's like, no, don't die on me, come back, please, stay alive. But in that moment, you believe it because you believe that relationship. You believe that these two characters do love each other. And even her death scene as well. This is no Marion Cotillard death scene from The Dark Knight Rises. This is a truly believable death scene.
Yeah, definitely. I think the lack of words sort of helps Brendan Fraser actually bring his acting forward, and I think that what makes it believable. If it have, as you said, over the pudding, it would have tasted sour.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to think of some other things in this movie as well. I did notice a lot more in this film than I did.
Hang on. We haven't talked about a Nux and a Moon. Bloody hell! Versus Evie.
Wow. Yes, I completely forgot about this. Yeah.
Potential lesbian.
Yeah.
What?
So they go. So they go with this whole reincarnation theme in this one, which is an element I actually forgot they did. But yeah, we get this whole weird thing where Evie was, what was it?
Pharaoh's daughter.
Pharaoh's daughter, and there was this rivalry between a Nux and a Moon. They have their cat fight in the movie, which is set up. It's all these feuds are like set up through the movie, which is great, and they're all paid off in their own way. And what can I say? Rachel Weisz looks great in Egyptian getup. It's a fun scene.
Well, yeah, for many reasons, that film is visually memorable.
Yeah, you can call me misogynist in the comments. I don't care, yes. But it's just, yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah, but I like the gold everywhere. I like the costumes. I like the people watching. I love the murals. I love the bit with the statues, and she throws a knife and it goes in his crotch. I love it when they just flip and they get weapons and they're really going at it. I love it.
Mm. Yeah, and I'm guessing they went through extensive like fight training for that scene and the other scene, because she's definitely a lot more actiony in this movie. Coin that word, actiony. Rachel Weisz's character, she really steps up a lot from the first one, and I think that's why I like a character a lot more in this. The whole ditziness in the first one kind of annoyed me, but in this one, she really comes into her own. She still feels like the same character, which is a problem I have with Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, but that just goes along with that they recast her character. But it does feel like that progression of the character, which I still like. She still has a ditzy moments. They all still feel like the same characters, but they have developed from the first one. One thing I did notice with this film, though, pretty much right from the beginning, is a lot of visual signifiers going back to Indiana Jones. I would say that Evie's character in this mirrors Marion Ravenwood's character from Raiders of the Lost Ark a lot more. That there are moments where she is a damsel in distress, for example, where she's tied to that plinth and they resurrect Imhotep and everyone has to save her. But there are the moments where she steps up, where she does take that gun and she's providing cover fire for Rick. And she's just, in terms of the fighting, she's a lot more proficient in her fighting in this movie. But also you've got the scene where Evie and Rick are running away from the huge torrent of water at the beginning of the film. It's completely like the end of Temple of Doom. After the minecart fight where Indy and is it Willie Scott are running away from the water, it reminds me of that. And when Jonathan and Rick dive out the window and land on that kind of, was it like that canopy thing? Again, that's like how Willie and Indy jump out of the building at the beginning in Shanghai and Temple of Doom. So you've got those qualities from those classic action adventure movies like the Indiana Jones films again in this movie. And you might not go, oh, that's a direct ripoff of, but your brain kind of goes, it's capturing that same kind of energy that those other films had.
I think it's definitely trying to hark back to the Indiana Jones films, but there's definitely a Hammer horror sort of feel to it at the same time.
Yeah,
it's quite campy. It's quite fun. There's moments of horror, but never actual terror.
Yeah, like even as a kid, I was never scared of these films at all in any single bit.
Yeah, and as you say, I think without the character development, especially over the years they're supposed to have gone by, it never would have worked.
Yeah, and I mean the soundtrack to this one as well. When I was listening to the soundtrack, it sounded a lot similar to the first one, so I thought Jerry Goldsmith came back, but actually this was Alan Silvestri, which I picked up on towards the end of this movie because the action theme in this one, the main adventure theme that plays throughout most of the film, it does sound a lot like Back to the Future. It's got a lot of those similar Alan Silvestri motifs and cues that he uses a lot in his scores. And when we flash forward to 2012, when we have The Avengers, which Alan Silvestri did the score for, there are moments in this where you can hear what would eventually become the Avengers fanfare for that first movie, the Avengers main theme for that first movie. But the soundtrack works, again, so well. You have a new love theme, I think. You have all the action music, and again, very bombastic, which this movie needs to be. But also...
we have you forgot the wistful music when Evie's sort of reliving her old life.
Yes.
And she nearly jumps off the dirigible.
Yeah. And although it's a very different composer, and of course every composer has their own way of going about music, or very different styles, it feels so much in keeping with the first film soundtrack. And I don't think The Mummy Returns uses any themes from the first one, and usually I call that out with movies. I get really annoyed about that if you have... I mean, it'd be like The Lord of the Rings, for example, if each one had different soundtracks and you never had a main theme carry over. The main themes can tether to characters, can tether to moments, which almost tell a story themselves without the dialogue of the film itself. Themes, absolutely. And they're the kind of soundtracks that I like the most. And although the first one did have some great themes, which I would have liked to have seen brought into this, this soundtrack's still so good in its own right and still captures that Egyptian feel to it, that adventure feel, that it feels like its own thing. And you could say that it's kind of that, like the development with the characters from the first film into the second one, you're getting that with the soundtrack too. It's a very different style, but yet it feels very in keeping with the first film soundtrack. Favorite moments then from Mummy Returns? I think we've pretty much gone through everything in this movie, but any other moments that we haven't talked about?
Alex bringing Evie back and the stalk thing. Want to talk about that some more? Or just talk about the bus scene with the 5 soldiers? Either of those?
I think we've got to talk about the bus scene, because this is arguably one of the biggest action scenes in the entire movie. It's got that classic Rick banter. It's like one of my favorite lines. It's probably a trailer line where he's like, "Oh, I hate mummies." He's like, "Just like old times, huh?" And he like gets the shotgun and starts firing out the back. I love that kind of stuff, and they keep it light-hearted. You've got the mummy that gets cut in half, and it's like climbing over the bars. And they actually use a guy in costume for one of the scenes. So I think it's when it gets onto the top deck and it's fighting with Rick. They use a guy in the costume for some of the close-up shots. I love that stuff. Or the bit where it's like clawing through the top of the bus and he's shooting the ceiling out. It's a great little action scene, and you need one because, like these films, even with Van Helsing, Steven Sommers is very clever where he places his action scenes. No action scene feels too overly long or overstays their welcome, everything like that. You do get the nice character moments where the film has time to breathe. It lulls back a little bit, develops characters.
I noticed it has a relief after every action sequence. Some sort of some sort of resolution before it goes on to another story part.
And every single action scene ends with that, like the victory fanfare when they get out of it, and you kind of like fist bump cheer that they get out of it onto the next one. Yeah, so it's just a really smart, resounding structure to these films. And you get like your moments. Of course, with movies like this, you're going to have exposition. You're going to have some kind of MacGuffin where it's like, we've got to get to somewhere to get the thing, and we've got to put the thing in the thing to stop the thing from happening. You have moments like that, but they're kind of unavoidable with films like this. Other favorite moments? I kind of mentioned the final battle.
Really? That's your favorite moment? Are we going favorite moments or memorable moments? Let's be honest, the final battle was not. I like the bit with Imhotep and Rick. I think that choreography was really cool to see Imhotep actually fighting for once.
They do a lot of speed ramping in it, though, which is something that kind of irritates me. And Wonder Woman did this a lot, where they do the whole punch, slow-mo, flip, and then we go back into fast mode. That kind of... But again, around the time that this came out, early 2000s, so many films were doing that. And even so many films are still doing it now. So I guess that's just a thing that's stuck since the Matrix film.
I love the design of the weapons. The design of the spears and the axes Imhotep uses, and I love all that. Everything's so detailed. Nothing feels out of place. Everything goes, of course it looks like that. It's great.
And the scepter that goes into the spear.
That was a bit silly. That was a bit stupid. No, I can't get involved with that bit.
I like the look of the spear itself, though, the actual design of it. But
yeah, but it looks so dumb when it's not a spear. It's just really.
I didn't have a problem with it. What else? What are the favorite scenes in the film? I saw this movie.
Moon, dying, Beatles. She falls. It's funny.
Yes. Yeah, and she gets like it's kind of heartbreaking in that moment actually, where she leaves Imhotep and runs out. Like he plays that so well.
Poor bloke. Fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's dedicated. He's tried to resurrect her in the first movie. It's his one true love.
Dedicated his life. What, twice?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say though, and maybe I missed something. Maybe I'll need to watch these movies again. But the first film, she's never actually properly resurrected, is she? She kind of is in mummy form. She's still wrapped in all bandages, but then her soul is taken away. And this movie just straight up begins where a Nox of the Moon's walking around.
Reincarnated.
Oh, is it? Oh, yeah. Okay. Okay. I guess that. Yeah.
It's kind of a cop out. Kind of makes sense.
Yeah. Other favorite moments, as I said, the final battle. I really like that.
Alan Armstrong when he loses his hand in the machine. He puts his hand in, his skeleton hand comes out. That's great.
It's just
so cartoonish.
This poor guy.
Want to watch it now? It just reminds me of The Office, talking about Eric Glitchmo and his little claw.
Do
you know what I mean? I just sort of feel bad. They go, I can't laugh at him now.
I tell you what, like so many people in these films, the first one, the second one, they get some horrible ends. I mean, Benny in the first one, just to be trapped in that tomb with no way out would be enough for me. Like, I think if there was a pistol lying around or something, I think I'd just end it right there.
Oh yeah.
The fact that all like his one torch goes out and these scarabs just eat him alive, it's horrible. In this one, this
sound
poor
effect, the sound effects.
Yeah. It just cuts to black, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Bye bye, Benny. And we all say it. We all say it.
And then in this one with where he gets his hand bitten, and then he kind of just walks off, and there's so much other stuff happening with the final battle and the
he wanders in, the Scorpion King sort of grabs and rips him in half, and it's like, oh, okay, that happened.
I was just about to say that, but like he's off screen for so long that you kind of forget about him, and then towards the end he just shows back up, and you think he's going to get away, and he's like, "Save me! I resurrected you!" And Imhotep's just like, "No,
why?"
Mate. Well, yeah, why? Speaking of that, though, exactly the same character that gets his hand all gnarled up. My favorite bit in this movie, I know my favorite bit, my favorite line. It's where he's running with two of his henchmen through the jungles as the pygmies are chasing them. And he's just like, "You two must sacrifice yourself for me." And he just runs off, and you just hear him say, "You shall be rewarded in heaven." That's like my favorite bit. I love that bit. And then the guys like kind of look at each other and try to make a run for it, but then get killed.
It's so over the top. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
It's so
I think over the top is the best line you could use to describe this movie. Absolutely.
You got to get your balls out. You got to go home. And this movie is full balls out. It's so outrageous. It's so overacting in places, over the top CGI, lots of gold, lots of glitter.
Yeah, I mean, even the final shot of each of the first movie and the second one. The first one is the classic Indiana Jones Last Crusade, riding into the sunset on horseback. This one is riding into the sunset on a dirigible. Like, just that one image alone just exactly. Like, what would the third one have been? Well, I know we get a third one. I don't count that as the true third one. If we'd have got the proper Stephen Sommers third one, would it have been like a spaceship or something? Like, what would it have been? Like, it would have been ridiculous. But overall opinions, if you like the first Mummy film, this is pretty much exactly the same. I would pretty much almost hold them on exactly level playing field, which is actually very good for a sequel. Usually sequels are vastly inferior to the first one or have a lot more problems. This one, although we have some problems with it, mostly in terms of the CGI, I think tonally it's exactly consistent with the first one. It's great to see these characters back. They still have great banter with each other and that natural chemistry that they all have. And I think that at its core, although you have all these great CGI action pieces, I think what it comes down to is these characters, and they're just so likable together in these first two movies. It's a shame that Stephen Sommers didn't come back to do the third one, because I would have loved to have seen his completed trilogy. But Mummy Returns, it's the one that I always used to watch the most compared to the first two, but they are pretty much level playing field for me. It'd be my favourite would change depending on the day of the week, in all honesty, with these first two.
I like they brought Ardeth Bay back, but they did a lot more with him.
Yeah, he's one of my favourite characters. They made the Magi, they brought them into the focus as well. They even hint that Rick is one as well. He's got the tattoo.
Yeah, I thought that was a bit over the top, to be honest. I thought I was a bit...
It's never really followed up on, is it? Like, it's hinted at, and then you just kind of chalk him up that always the hero of the story, and he's defeating all these monsters and everything. So he's kind of a part of a faction of the Magi, although he says that he only got the tattoo as a lark, like from a friend or something, doesn't he?
He didn't really know where it came from. At an orphanage in Cairo. Yeah.
So it's it wasn't particularly necessary to the film, but it's fine for what it is, the kind of movie that it is. We said everything on Mummy Returns.
I can't think of much else to say.
Right, this next bit's going to be very short because I really don't have much to say on this next one. So 6 years later, my bad, 2008, we get the third film in the Mummy Trilogy, although I count it as a kind of side film. It doesn't feel like a continuation to me. In The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, this was almost just completely did away with everything in the first two. We have some returning cast members back. We have Brendan Fraser coming back. We have John Hannah. And I think that's really it for returning cast. I don't think there's anyone else from the first two that make a comeback for it. We ditch the whole Egyptian setting and Imhotep, and we have a new mummy in this film played by Jet Li. And we have like the Chinese terracotta army.
And a zombie army.
And a zombie army. And I think that when this film was coming out, when I saw trailers, this was when it really dawned on me that too many sequels are bad. And when you lose a lot of the ingredients of the first couple of films, it's not going to feel the same. and it's going to be vastly inferior. But it was still a Mummy film. It had exactly the same title on the poster. The poster looked really cool. Brendan Fraser is back.
Yeah.
And I was intrigued by it because I do love the first ones so much. And I was actually reading a lot about the behind the scenes of this one before because I was curious myself. I'd never read it before. It was offered to Stephen Sommers, but I think that it was just at a standstill. It was like years were going by, nothing was going, and I think he just kind of lost the enthusiasm to come back and do another Mummy film. All the cast wanted to come back for it, especially the guy who played Ardith Bey. He wanted to come back, but then he learned the script that they were going for.
And he went, lol, no.
Well, it wasn't even going to feature his character. He says he was completely open to return. He would have liked to have come back, but the story didn't involve him. And it was literally just going to be Rick, Evie, and Alex, and I guess Jonathan as well. It was just going to be that side of the cast, and it wasn't going to be any of the cast members that were involved with the Egypt stuff. And, you know, Rachel Weisz was good to come back for it as well. She said that she would like to come back for the character. And it was only really until she saw the script, she said that she thought it had a lot of script problems. And also the film was pretty much filming directly after she'd just given birth. So it was like a complete scheduling thing. So they recast her. And we have, what's her name? Maria Bello playing Evie in this film. And even by her own admission as well, and the writers as well, said that the Evie they created for this film was almost like a completely different Evie from the first two. She plays it very differently. Her mannerisms are very different. And she almost feels like a different character. And I always hated
very placid.
Yeah. And
like
she just
Rachel Weisz, especially in 2, was very feisty.
Yes.
Like, she got stuck in. And as you say, she's a bit of a damsel again. She's a bit of a mum as well, and a damsel. So it's a bit like, what's Molly Weasley doing?
Well, I understand the passive thing, because where we find these, I guess it just doesn't make for an interesting film though, but where we pick up with these characters at the beginning of this film is that they've been in retirement for a long time. I think they say after the war they kind of ditched that whole exploration adventure lifestyle. They've settled down, but both of them are really looking in their relationship as well. I mean, things are pretty dead in their relationship, just like physically and emotionally. Like they want that adventure to bring them closer together, like the first two films did. But just, I think it's because it's a different actress. She plays it differently. Her whole character feels different. And I think the chemistry between Brendan Fraser, in terms of his acting, is very noticeable in this film as well. I think that without Rachel Weisz coming back, that had a knock on his acting. And he feels very tired. You could argue that that's where the character is. But he doesn't feel like the same Rick from the first two. It doesn't feel like he has that spark or passion for it now. And that right there, that description just pretty much sums up the entire movie for me. It feels tired. It felt like no one really wanted to come back for it. Yeah, it was kind of half-assed. It was thrown out there because The Mummy is a successful franchise and we just want to complete the trilogy. And unnecessary. In all honesty, it just felt unnecessary as a film. And that's pretty much my review on this film. I saw it when it came out in 2008. I think I saw it opening weekend. I was really looking forward to it. Was absolutely gutted by it. And just do the usual thing I do with films, like I do with Indiana Jones 4. Just say, yep, that one didn't happen. My Mummy franchise is a 2-film series. And until today, I mean, I watched this one fresh before we jumped on a live stream. I hadn't watched it since then. The first two I've watched many times in between. This one, I'd only watched at the cinema when it came out in 2008. And literally, it's arguable if I even watched this one before the live stream. I kind of just threw it on in the background because I was just bored senseless by it.
Yeah, it's there's really not a lot of story. There's some sort of half-baked conflict between Alex and his dad that, frankly, we're not quite sure where it comes from. Alex has become American. There's God knows why his accent's changed. We've got different actors for Evie, as you say. Rick's acting different. So there's a big different dynamic there. So that the film can't feel the same as the other ones. And you've got John Hannah, but I don't know. He's a bit of a one-trick pony as a character, I suppose. He's funny, but doesn't add a lot to the story.
No, and not in this one as well. And I think that's down to the change in script writers as well. As we said, Stephen Sommers knows how to write for small characters and for the comedic characters. Although they can be a one-trick pony, they're still endearing as characters, and that's what Jonathan was in the first two films. In this, he's just tired. I didn't laugh at any of the jokes. There's a whole thing with like a yak where it's like throwing up on him.
Yeah.
There's a bit where,
isn't it? Yeah.
He's like his back is on fire or something, and he's saying to Rick like "spank my ass" and things like that, and it's done for laughs, and it's just not fun. It's go straight into very weird territory, very like You know,
And the
brother-in-law.
Yetis that come out of nowhere, like Bjorn, just there
Oh,
and just.
well, Beorn in The Hobbit, I'll defend because you know that's a character in the actual book
But
that
we
helps
needed
him get to
more.
the next bit.
The
We
Yetis,
needed more.
the Yetis looked a bit crap. They looked a bit like the Wolfman looked in the remake of the Wolfman, which you
Yeah.
shouldn't watch because it's horrific. They need to do a lot more.
See, I just didn't need the Yetis in this film at all. But actually, watching it and having watched Let's Plays of Uncharted 2 in between, it's very similar to that. I think they're looking for Shangri-La in that as well, and Yetis are involved in some respect in Uncharted 2. So it was reminding me of that watching it again now. I hate the look of them. I hate the whole action scene with them, and then they work for them. They're good. It's Yetis have no place in a mummy film. I'm sorry. Even if you are doing Shangri-La, it's just visually completely inconsistent. And I guess you could argue that with Mummy Returns, you had the whole pygmy action scene, and this is kind of the equivalent of that. It's that really random placed other antagonist faction that the characters fight, but it just felt so tired. It's not funny. It's not inspired in any way, and it's just the whole film's really pisses me. It's just the switch your brain off at the door kind of entertainment, but this is just switch your brain off.
Entertainment.
It's dull.
Yeah, no.
It's so dull and tired all the way through.
Can you remember
this.
any of the sets? Because I found the sets so I can't remember any of them at all. There's
no, not really.
Like maybe the Scorpion King looked crap, but at least you remember him.
Yeah.
Jet Li basically isn't in it.
So forgettable. So,
there's no big temple or castle or throne room or whatever. There's nothing like that. I don't remember any of it.
Well, even
the whole movie sort of passed me by.
The look of him is just. I know what they were trying to do, like the whole terracotta army thing, and he's like surrounded in like porcelain, but it doesn't make for a terrifying bad guy. His voice isn't particularly, memorable. Like Imhotep, you remember, it's like the Anox on a moon. It's that distorted, low rasp he's got to his voice. But yeah, the look of him isn't particularly menacing. He's not a compelling character. He really isn't. I mean, with Imhotep, you've got the whole love thing, which some people could see as a little trite, but it works for the movie. He's trying to resurrect his long lost love. They die for each other. They love each other completely. In this one, we get this really convoluted, long backstory. It just went on and on and on. You could sum this up in 5 minutes. If Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, could have an opening prologue, which sums up the entire history of the ring before the events of Fellowship in like a 7-minute montage, this has like a 10.5 minute backstory of this character, and it ultimately just boils down to he's power hungry and he wants eternal life. You don't need 10 minutes to tell that. You really don't.
And some business about a woman and a daughter and the Emperor's general or something, which frankly doesn't have really any bearing on the story at all.
Yeah,
they could have not had that connection and it would have gone the exact same.
Yeah. It's just, what does it start off with? He's a general guy. He's taking over China. He's accomplishing all these, taking over all these provinces. Fair enough. And then he went to the majors and he learned all the elements of like metal, wood, fire, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then his powers hit a moment and he wanted more of them. And then he got them, but then he wanted to, he was still getting old and he couldn't beat that out. So he wanted to try and become immortal. So he sent someone to find a witch. And then the guy fell in love with the witch, and then
no, yeah, the general of the Emperor fell in love with the witch, and conceived the daughter that is in the film.
Yeah, and then
crap.
They found a book with all the ancient mystic writings in, and found the secret to it, and then he killed her, and then this made him a mummy somehow. It's so you don't need all that.
So convoluted, isn't it? I don't.
Like what?
How did she even get away? How did she get away? I get that she killed an emperor, but she's surrounded by thousands of guards.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at the original '30s Mummy film, what was that? Group of people go to fucking Egypt, bring back a sarcophagus, open it, and bad shit happens.
Yeah.
Boom, done. What else is saying this? Yeah, the new Alex it really weirded me out watching these films really close together again, that he's American, and you could argue that maybe as a kid, he went off to America and adopted the accent, but it doesn't, again,
it's not explained.
It doesn't feel like the same kid. And I know that, people grow up, he's going to be different, but there's, no through line with that character. The action and the CGI in it, the CGI is still bad in this film, but the action just has none of the kind of punctuation to it or the beats. It's kind of there just to fill time. The other ones, as we said, had those moments at the end of victory where you as a viewer, you're like, yes, bring on the next one. It's that classic adventure feel. This is just so meandering and dreary, and it's just, I don't care. Like, just end the movie already. You have the scene with the Yetis. You have a scene which I guess was trying to recapture the magic of the London bus. It was London, wasn't it? In Mummy Returns that they're driving through on the double-decker buses.
I think so, yeah.
You've got like it's like a chariot in this, isn't it? And you've got Rick riding one of the terracotta horses.
No, that's not very good, is it? It's just cringy.
You've got that, and then you've like Mummy Returns again. You've kind of got two armies facing down at each other. You've got like the army of the dead from Lord of the Rings faces a different army of the dead with the terracotta army. And actually, talking about Lord of the Rings, they used exactly the same technology that was used in the Lord of the Rings films in, like, I guess it was Two Towers and Return of the King. I think the software's called Massive, and it was developed by a guy working at Weta Digital. I think it's an AI technology where you can have so many, individual soldier characters, and they will all have unique animations when they meet each other, kind of like a video game thing, I guess, with like, they all do their own thing when you look at these vast bird's eye view shots. But even those battle scenes don't conjure anything. I think why I liked
they look very good either. The visuals weren't very good.
No. And I think why I liked the one in the other one is because I liked the character, the Egyptian Aragorn, as I called him, and that last-ditch effort where they think they've beaten them all. They look over at the distance. It's like that total King Theoden Oliphant moment from Return of the King. And the rousing music plays. It's like, okay, we're all going to die, but bring it on, and they go into fight. You get nothing like that.
Let's change tack. Let's not pull this apart. I kind of feel bad for the film now.
No, I don't. Fucking tear it to shreds.
Let's try and think of one good thing about it.
Wow.
I'm thinking about the scene with the horse pulling the guy apart, the scene with the zombies, terracotta army.
Okay, one good thing I will say that, some of the acting with like Michelle Yeoh, I think that's how you pronounce her. She's from stuff like Crouch Tiger Dragon. She's always solid in everything she's in. She's truly a great actress. She's good in it with the material that she's given. She's fine. Brendan Fraser, it feels tight. There's moments where he tries to capture the fun of the first two movies, but I think even he knows
his heart's not in it. Yeah.
No, absolutely.
He knows it's a straight to DVD.
Yeah, the music's okay, I think.
It's not memorable. I don't remember any of it.
Randy Edelman did the music, and John Debney did a lot of the music for it, kind of a collaboration piece, this one. Listening to it on its own when it hits the credits, it's a perfectly serviceable action movie score. Not particularly memorable, fairly, derivative of everything else. Doesn't come close to the soundtracks for the first two. But, I'm not going to just disregard someone's music. I mean, it still sounds great. It's big. It's epic sounding.
But I don't remember it. I remember I remember the music from the first two. I don't remember anything from three. It's got no memorable features to it whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to do it on this stream right now, but I could hum certain tracks from the first two Mummy films. If you asked me to, I've literally just seen the movie. You asked me to hum any music from that, and I couldn't. It all blends into one. And I know we were setting out to find something positive here, and it kind of hasn't turned out like that.
I know. But I'm sorry. I can't.
They
don't have Ardeth Bay. They have... What's the guy's name? The Emperor. What's his name?
Oh, what? The Emperor character?
The actor's name. Completely gone. My brain's gone.
Which Emperor character are you talking about? The Egyptian Emperor?
No, in 3.
Oh, Jet Li.
Jet Li, thank you.
Yeah.
They have Jet Li in it, and he's completely underused. I don't know if he's an actor, but...
Yeah, he is, yeah. Well, he's a martial artist and actor. He has done some good stuff.
Well, okay, can he act? I mean...
Yeah, he's in a film called Fearless, which is a martial art based on a true story of a real guy. Yeah. That's a fantastic film. He's really good in that. I think he's in the film Hero as well. That's a good martial art, and he's good acting in it as well. He's just not given in this movie.
Have you seen Chronicles of Riddick? I can compare it to that.
No, I've seen bits. I haven't seen the movie.
The main bad guy in Chronicles of Riddick, when he moves, he's sort of like his soul moves before, and then his arm follows it.
Right.
And I think that sort of thing to show how supernatural is would be a lot better, especially with the martial arts, than him just sort of breathing fire, which is a bit. It did not very good, especially because he looked like a China teapot. I mean, it's...
he didn't have any of the personality that Imhotep
No,
did, despite both being CGI characters and probably motion captured.
Wasted. I think he was wasted.
There's one bit where they try and do a bit of martial arts fighting towards the end. Is it Michelle Yeoh's character, or is it a daughter where they kind of got like the wire work in it and the sword fight? Like, I love kind of stuff like that. I love films like that, but it's so small. It's like a minute long, 2 minutes long, if that. And you've got Jet Li shape shifting into weird like dog monsters.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You've got the bit at the end. The end comes off the dagger, and they just sort of both hold it, and they just sort of inside him, like,
yeah, and then it like fuses together in a really weird way. Yeah.
What? Yeah.
And even the very last scene of the film really pissed me off, because how do we end the first two Mummy films? First one, riding into the sunset, classic adventure ending. Second one, kind of funny, tongue-in-cheek, flying into the sunset in a huge dirigible. The third one, you've got Jonathan just saying, I'm getting away from all this craziness. I'm going to go to somewhere where there aren't any mummies. I'm going to Peru. Starts driving off. Subtitle comes up. Later that year, mummies were found in Peru. Ha ha ha. And then it cuts to credits, and then I just want to like open my veins right there in the movie theaters. Like, it was just so.
Yeah.
That's not how you end a movie. It's just like the whole like subtitles coming up on screen, like a gag like that. That's never been used in the Mummy films. It doesn't even fit the tone of the Mummy films itself. I just didn't find it funny at all.
Much like with Master and Commander, when you end a film setting up a sequel, it's going to cause problems. It never goes well. It never ends up being... It means it's insisting upon itself. It means surely you haven't got faith that they'll come and want to see the next one because they want to.
Yeah.
And I think that's all we can really... I can't think of anything else to say about Mummy.
I literally have nothing else to say on this movie at all. Overall opinions, it's an absolute dull, just vacuous experience of a film. It makes me angry that they kind of cap off this trilogy with this movie. But in all honesty, it's so far removed from the first two. All the characters feel different. Either their heart's not in it, or they're just full-on recast.
Literally different people, yeah.
Different setting, different, just everything like that, that it feels completely just divorced from the first two movies anyway. So the first two movies have always remained for me that kind of two-film series. You got like Kill Bill 1 and 2, and now we've also got Mummy and Mummy Returns. Like, you know, just leave it at that. They summed it up. I would have loved a third movie if Stephen Summers had come back with Rachel Weisz, and they could have capped off the trilogy. But again, even with that second one, I got the sense of, like, what would you do for a third one? You got to bring Imhotep back again. You got to bring Anax and Amun back. And there's only so many times you can do that without it feeling tired. So I think 2 movies was the right amount. This was just complete studio greed, wanting another one because the Mummy was successful.
But they half-assed it.
They half-assed it.
They clearly half-assed the script.
Yeah. I mean, it did make a profit. It was done on a budget of $145 million. You think about that. You think of how many hungry mouths that kind of money would have fed if it had been used for other things. It made 401 mil, but that was just the Mummy's name carries it, doesn't it? It probably came out at a time where there wasn't much on. It was the kind of big summer blockbuster. I mean, I went to see it.
I'm always careful to accept how many people saw it or how much money it made at the box office as an indicator of how good it is. Because people tend to pay for a ticket, you know, and then see the film. So let's be honest, Avatar made a lot of money. I think that was an abortion of a film.
I was just going to debate the Avatar comparison. Yeah, was it like 2 billion it made or something, or close 1.8?
Yeah,
absolutely ridiculous amount of money.
It's awful though. One of the worst ones I've ever seen.
I don't know if I think it was just because it was so hyped up, and then I watched it and I was like, I have literally seen this story be told in exactly the same way about 100 times. It's done in so many movies, and loads of other movies have done it better.
Pocahontas, Dance of the Wolves. It's basically
Fern Gully, Last Samurai. Just everything, literally anything that's kind of like the white man is the devil, and they're kind of, you know, ruining civilizations and people. It's like in every film. You could argue that it's exactly the same. I didn't like it. Anyway, that's our review on Avatar. If I am going to recommend the Mummy films, just watch the first two. And yes.
Weigh my
thoughts on the latest one, but even now, just stick to the first two. Like, or even no, tell you what, go back and like watch
It's its own thing. Why can't I watch it? It's if it's its own thing, surely you can watch it and sort of go, this is self-contained. You know, give it the benefit of the doubt. Can you do that? And does it come out all right? Because I haven't seen it yet, and I want it to be good. It's got Tom Cruise. He's okay.
I don't want to give too much right now without getting to my review, but what I will say is that it suffers from the problem that all these studios now wanting to jump on a cinematic universe does. It doesn't feel like a standalone. It feels partially like a standalone Mummy film, and then a lot of it is like, right, we're going to stop its tracks now to set all this shit up for the universe. So it feels just really inconsistent. Okay. But no, with this one, like, go back and watch like the 30s or when was it, like 50s Mummy film, if you're curious to watch those old ones, and also watch, you know, Mummy and Mummy Returns. It is very different. It pays homage to those original ones, but it is very much its own thing. Ignore Tomb of the Dragon Emperor completely. It's an absolute waste of time, even if you're a fan of this franchise. I think we've got a lot,
especially if you're a fan of this franchise.
Oh God, yeah, absolutely.
We should do a Crystal Skull versus Dragon Emperor. Which is the worst sequel?
Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, because I love The Mummy and Mummy Returns, but the Indiana Jones trilogy is an absolute different kettle of fish, and the legacy that trilogy has for me and just for film in general, that fourth one absolutely gutted me and knocked the wind out of me when I watched it. Very similar style of movies, though, in terms of their previous ones in the franchise. But I think we've talked a lot longer than we expected to.
I can't think of anything else to say now.
Our initial estimate for this review was going to be like half hour, 45 minutes long, hour tops. I think we might have gone a little bit over that. But that will do it for our review on the Mummy Trilogy. It was a lot of fun talking about these films, and what we're trying to do now is with these new films that are coming out, say like The Mummy, we are trying to do some of these older retro style reviews in lead up to these new ones. So it was very fun jumping on this. Thanks, Al, for jumping on with me, because I know you love these films. It was great talking about these films with you. We should do Van Helsing sometime if we ever have an opportunity to do that. Maybe like a Halloween special. We'll jump on and do one for Van Helsing. But yeah, that'll do it for our review on the Mummy Trilogy. Be sure to comment, subscribe, let us know what you thought of this trilogy. Even leave some thoughts on what you think of the new Mummy film too. Anything regarding the Mummy, please do let us know. In terms of what's coming up on the channel, tomorrow night we'll be going live for a review. That'll be me, George, and Tate on the latest Mummy film. There will also be more reaction videos from me. I have a whole lot to get backdated and get out there. I'll get on them immediately as soon as I can. We've got loads of other shows coming out now, guys. We've almost got daily content, so please hit that subscribe button. Also hit the bell icon at the side so you get a notification every time we upload something new. That'll do it from us. And until the next video, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.